The escape didn't begin with freedom. It began with fear that could kill her. The night Samantha Blake finally understood the meaning of survival was the same night her world stopped feeling like a home and started feeling like a trap that had learned her every weakness. She had been married to Richard Blake long enough for silence to become more dangerous than his voice. Richard was not just a husband in public eyes. He was a respected businessman, a man whose name carried weight in corporate rooms, whose smile convinced outsiders that control and charm were the same thing. But behind closed doors, that image dissolved into something far colder, something that turned every corner of their house into a reminder that power could be private and merciless. The emotional hook of realization settled deep inside Samantha as the evening darkened. She was not living with a man who lost his temper. She was living with a man who chose when to break things and when to let them heal just enough to break again. That night, the escalation did not arrive loudly at first. It arrived in small changes. The way Richard's footsteps lingered longer than usual. The way his silence filled rooms before he entered them. The way even the air felt controlled, as if the house itself was waiting for permission to breathe. Samantha moved carefully, reading patterns she had learned over years of endurance. Every instinct told her something was wrong in a way that could no longer be survived. The man she had once tried to understand was no longer hiding his cruelty behind unpredictability. He was becoming deliberate in it. When confrontation finally came, it did not need words to be understood. It came through presence, through pressure, through the silent dominance of a man who believed consequences belonged only to others. Samantha did not fight back with force. She had learned long ago that force was not something she was allowed to win with. Instead, something inside her shifted, quiet, irreversible, a realization sharper than fear. Staying meant disappearing without leaving. For the first time, survival stopped being a thought and became a decision. Samantha moved through the house with controlled urgency, not planning escape in detail, but rejecting the idea of staying long enough to perfect it. She took only what instinct allowed. Nothing sentimental, nothing heavy enough to slow her down. No final note, no explanation, no permission asked. Because permission was the language of the life she was ending. The outside world hit her like cold air after suffocation. Streets that once felt distant now became the only direction forward. Every step away from the house felt like walking out of a sentence she had been trapped inside for years. But freedom did not feel safe. It felt exposed. Every passing car carried the possibility of recognition. Every shadow felt like it remembered her name. Richard Blake did not just own property or influence. He owned networks, people, systems that extended far beyond walls. Samantha knew escape did not mean escape from him. It only meant running before he decided she was worth chasing. Her breath shook as she reached the highway edge, the city lights behind her dissolving into distance. The world ahead was unknown, unclaimed, and unforgiving. And then, as she disappeared into the dark highway, a black convoy started following her car from a distance. She wasn't just escaping a husband. She was escaping an entire empire of control. The city that swallowed Samantha Blake did not feel like freedom. It felt like noise without safety, like movement without direction, like survival without certainty. When she finally crossed into its boundaries, she was no longer a wife in a controlled life. She was an anonymous figure standing inside a world that did not care whether she lived or vanished. The streets of New York stretched endlessly in every direction, bright with motion but empty of trust. She had no money she could safely trace, no identity that could not be questioned, no phone number she could call without risking exposure. Every connection she once believed in now felt like a possible extension of Richard Blake's reach. A powerful hook of realization formed inside her. Escaping a man like Richard did not end control. It scattered it into the world around her. As she moved deeper into the city, memories returned in fragments she had buried just to function. Not just violence, but precision. The way he controlled her routines. The way conversations had limits she could not see until she crossed them. The way apologies were never forgiveness, only temporary suspension of punishment. Psychological control that didn't need chains because it had already rewritten her instincts. That was the true prison she had escaped. But prisons like that did not end when doors opened. They followed through habits, through fear, through the belief that safety was always temporary. Samantha found a cheap motel on the edge of the city, the kind of place that existed for people who did not want to be remembered. She registered under a name that felt unfamiliar even as she spoke it, as if she were borrowing another person's existence for survival. Inside the room, the silence was worse than the streets. Every sound outside the thin walls made her tense. Every passing car felt like it slowed down too long. The flicker of a hallway light felt intentional, like surveillance disguised as malfunction. She checked the door lock twice, then again, as if repetition could build certainty. The emotional weight of realization grew heavier. She had not escaped danger. She had only changed its shape. Because Richard Blake was not just a husband with power. He was a system of influence. People who owed him favors. Companies that answered his calls. Quiet networks that did not appear on maps but existed in decisions, delays, and disappearances. And Samantha understood something she had refused to accept before. He would not simply look for her. He would expect her to be found. Hours passed like fractured pieces of time. The city outside continued living as if nothing had changed, but inside her mind every second felt borrowed. She stared at the ceiling, forcing herself not to imagine footsteps outside her door, not to assign meaning to every distant sound. But fear does not need permission to grow. It grows in silence. It grows in waiting. It grows in the space between certainty and doubt. By midnight, Samantha realized escape was not an event. It was a temporary state, one that would only last until someone decided she no longer deserved anonymity. And Richard Blake always decided things. She sat up slowly, listening to the buildings settle around her, understanding with a cold clarity that staying still was just another way of being found. Then a knock came at the door. Not loud, not urgent, controlled. Samantha froze. A voice followed, calm and professional, from the other side. The motel clerk. And what he said next changed everything. Because someone had been asking for a woman, matching her exact description. Safety almost came until someone powerful knocked on her door. The moment the motel clerk's words ended, Samantha Blake felt something inside her shift from fear into alert survival. Not panic alone, but calculated panic, the kind that forces a mind to move even when the body wants to freeze. Someone had been asking for her description. That was never random. That was search behavior. That was pursuit. Samantha stepped back from the door instinctively, her eyes scanning the cheap room as if it might suddenly reveal a second exit. The walls felt thinner now, the silence louder. The hallway outside no longer just empty space, but a potential pathway for danger. A powerful hook of instinct tightened inside her chest. Being seen was the beginning of being caught. Her breathing grew shallow as her mind replayed every possibility. Richard Blake's influence did not operate like ordinary pursuit. It didn't rush. It tracked. It observed. It closed distance slowly, like something confident the outcome had already been decided. She moved quickly, grabbing what little she had brought with her. Nothing mattered except motion. Staying in one place meant being located. Being located meant being returned. Her hands trembled as she checked the door lock again, then the window, then the hallway gap beneath the door. Every detail became a threat vector in her mind. Every sound outside the room carried weight. A distant elevator ding made her freeze completely. Then footsteps. Slow, controlled, purposeful, not rushed like hotel staff, not casual like guests, measured like someone who already knew exactly where they were going. Samantha's heart tightened as her survival instinct screamed one clear instruction: leave now. But the hallway offered no certainty. The staircase could be watched. The exit could be compromised. Every direction suddenly felt like a trap designed to punish movement. And then a knock, not loud, not aggressive, just once. Enough. The sound cut through her thoughts like a command she didn't agree to, but still obeyed instinctively. She stepped back again, her body pressed against the far wall, eyes locked on the door as if it had become the center of her entire world. Another knock followed, slightly firmer, still controlled, still deliberate. Whoever was outside did not behave like someone uncertain. That was what made it worse. Uncertainty she could understand. Control meant intention. And intention meant power. Her mind flashed to Richard Blake instantly. His men, his reach, his ability to turn distance into illusion. Maybe this was it. Maybe the escape had ended before it truly began. Or worse, maybe it never began at all. Her hand hovered near anything she could use to defend herself, though the room offered almost nothing. Fear pressed in from every direction until even breathing felt like surrender. The knock came again, and then a voice followed through the door. Calm, low, certain, not familiar, not hostile in tone, but absolutely unafraid. Samantha froze, caught between two impossible instincts: run or listen, trust or escape, hope or survival. The silence stretched until it felt like the room itself was waiting for her decision. Finally, against every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, she moved toward the door. Her hand touched the lock, paused, then turned. The door opened slowly, revealing the hallway light spilling into the room like a blade of clarity cutting through fear. And standing there was not Richard Blake's men, not police, not danger she recognized. It was a man in a black suit, expression unreadable, eyes steady with controlled urgency. He looked directly at her and said the words that broke her remaining sense of safety completely. You're not safe here. He wasn't there to save her, but he had already been watching her for weeks. The man standing in the motel doorway did not move like someone who had arrived by accident. He moved like someone who had already accounted for every possible outcome before stepping forward. Samantha Blake instinctively stepped back, her mind refusing to accept how quickly her situation had shifted from hiding to being found. The man in the black suit did not rush her. He did not raise his voice. He did not invade her space. That alone made him more dangerous than anyone she had encountered so far. A powerful hook formed in her thoughts, sharp and unsettling. Fear does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes arrives in perfect control. Behind him, the hallway remained empty, but Samantha no longer trusted empty spaces. She had learned too quickly that silence could be staged. The man finally spoke. His voice was calm, measured, and deliberately steady, as if emotion itself was irrelevant to him. Richard Blake sent people for you. No question. A statement. Samantha's breath caught, but she said nothing, because he didn't ask her for confirmation. He didn't need it. That realization alone made her stomach tighten. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, but not in a threatening way. More like someone entering a space they had already evaluated for risk. His presence did not feel chaotic. It felt structured. Then he said his name, Lucian Moretti. The name carried weight, even in silence. Not spoken like introduction, but recognition, like the world was expected to understand it already. Samantha didn't, but she felt it anyway. Something about him did not belong to ordinary danger. It belonged to systems she had never seen, levels of control that operated beyond what Richard Blake represented. Where Richard controlled people, this man controlled outcomes. Lucian's eyes scanned the room once, briefly, then returned to her. You've been tracked since you left his house, he said. Not by one group, by several. Samantha's confusion deepened. Why are you telling me this? A pause. Not hesitation, calculation, because you're still alive. That answer should have reassured her. Instead, it made her more alert. Survival was not given freely in his world. It was managed. Lucian's men, he explained without emotion, had already been monitoring movement patterns connected to Richard Blake's network. They were not reacting to her escape. They had anticipated it. A cold realization settled inside Samantha. Her life had not become visible the moment she ran. It had always been visible. She had simply stepped into awareness of it too late. Lucian did not offer comfort. He did not soften truth. Instead, he created structure around danger itself. You don't have protection, he said. You have access to survival. The distinction was intentional. Samantha felt the imbalance immediately. Nothing about the situation was equal. Not power, not knowledge, not control. Even her fear belonged to him now, because he understood it better than she did. And yet, he had not left. That was a contradiction she could not solve. Why would someone like him step into something like this? Lucian finally looked away for the first time, briefly checking a device in his hand. The shift in his expression was subtle, but immediate. His calm did not break, but it sharpened Samantha noticed instantly. "What is it?" she asked before she could stop herself. He didn't answer right away. Then his voice lowered slightly. "Your husband just changed strategy." A pause. "He's deployed men into the city." Another pause, heavier this time. "They're not looking for you anymore." Lucian's eyes returned to hers. "They're hunting you." And in that moment, Samantha understood the truth of her situation. She had not escaped Richard Blake. She had only triggered him. Protection in his world was never free. It was a contract written in shadows. Lucian Moretti did not offer Samantha Blake safety the way ordinary men would offer it. He offered it like an equation already solved. The city outside the motel room felt heavier now, as if the air itself had changed after his words. Samantha stood frozen, aware that every second she delayed made her more exposed to Richard Blake's hunters. Yet stepping toward Lucian felt like stepping out of one trap and into another whose shape she could not yet see. A powerful hook formed in her mind, unsettling in its clarity. Freedom was not the absence of control. It was a choice in which control would destroy you slower. Lucian did not pressure her verbally. He did not need to. His presence carried authority that filled the room without effort. Samantha could sense it now, not just from him, but from what followed him. The structure of power around him extended beyond walls, beyond people. It was an invisible network that reacted before commands were even spoken. He turned slightly, speaking into a discreet device. Within minutes, the world outside the motel began to shift. Vehicles that did not belong to any official authority arrived without sound. Men in dark suits positioned themselves at angles that blocked sightlines, exits, and predictable movement paths. Samantha realized she was no longer being watched by chance. She was being contained. Lucian's voice remained steady. "If you stay here, you die. If you come with me, you survive." There was no emotional manipulation in the statement. Only structure. Only outcome. Samantha's throat tightened. "And what do I become if I go with you?" Lucian looked at her for a long moment before answering. "That depends on how long you stay alive." The honesty should have pushed her away. Instead, it removed illusion. Richard Blake had controlled her through fear disguised as love. Lucian did not disguise anything. He simply replaced uncertainty with reality. And reality, in his world, was more stable than hope. Reluctantly, Samantha made her decision. Not because she trusted him, because she trusted her odds of survival, even less without him. The convoy formed quickly. Black vehicles, tinted glass, coordinated spacing. Samantha was placed in the center, not as protection, but as priority. That distinction did not go unnoticed by her. It made her feel both important and trapped at the same time. As the city moved past the windows, Samantha realized something disturbing. She was not escaping danger. She was being transferred between two versions of it. Richard Blake's world was chaos masked as control. Lucian Moretti's world was control disguised as calm. And she had just crossed the boundary between them. The streets blurred into industrial corridors, then private routes she did not recognize. Every intersection was secured before they arrived. Every possible threat route appeared already accounted for. It was not travel. It was extraction. Samantha pressed her hand against the window once, then pulled it back, realizing how easily her life had become part of someone else's system. A powerful emotional realization surfaced. She was no longer running from someone who wanted to own her. She was entering the territory of someone who already understood ownership as structure. Eventually, the convoy slowed. Massive gates appeared ahead, surrounded by fortified walls hidden behind architectural elegance. The estate did not look like a fortress from a distance. It looked like control made beautiful. As the convoy approached, the gates began to open, and then every system inside Lucian Moretti's network went silent for half a second, before exploding into alarm. Her husband didn't lose her. He sent war to get her back. The moment the estate alarms erupted, the illusion of controlled safety fractured. For Samantha Blake, it felt like the world itself had inhaled sharply and refused to exhale. The convoy had barely crossed the outer gates when the first impact struck the perimeter. Not random violence, not panic-driven chaos, but structured force. Multiple entry points were hit simultaneously. cutting off exit routes with precision that revealed planning, intelligence, and resources far beyond street-level retaliation. Lucian Moretti's security responded instantly. The transition from silence to violence was seamless. Trained units deployed without confusion, forming layered defensive positions around the convoy and estate perimeter. Every movement was calculated, every angle covered, every blind spot eliminated within seconds. Gunfire followed. Not chaotic spraying, but controlled engagement, short bursts, discipline suppression, tactical repositioning. The estate was not being overwhelmed. It was being tested. Samantha pressed down instinctively as the vehicle door locked her inside a shifting battlefield. Her breathing turned shallow as she realized something terrifyingly important. This was not a simple rescue operation gone wrong. This was a response, a counterforce, a declaration. A powerful hook formed inside her mind, sharp and undeniable. Richard Blake was not chasing her like a desperate husband. He was deploying like a commander refusing to lose territory. Lucian's world had not ended safety. It had only changed the definition of threat. The convoy split under protocol, redirecting toward a reinforced underground access point beneath the estate. As the vehicle descended through concealed routes, Samantha caught glimpses of coordinated movement above. Men in motion, suppressive fire lines forming, defensive grids activating like a living machine. For the first time, she understood the scale of Lucian Moretti's power. It was not loud. It was structural, and it was already in motion before the attack even fully revealed itself. Inside the underground bunker, the environment shifted instantly from external chaos to controlled containment. Reinforced steel doors sealed behind them. Emergency systems activated. Communication channels rerouted through encrypted layers. Samantha stepped out of the vehicle into silence that felt heavier than gunfire. Lucian was already there, not panicked, not rushed, standing at the central command console as if the attack had been expected rather than surprising. His expression remained composed, eyes scanning incoming data feeds, issuing minimal instructions that carried maximum impact. He did not look like a man under attack. He looked like a man adjusting variables. Samantha watched him carefully, something inside her shifting again. Fear was no longer the only emotion present. It was now layered with reluctant understanding. This world did not distinguish between safety and danger the way hers once had. It only measured control, loss, and retaliation speed. A powerful emotional realization settled in her chest. Even protection here was temporary. Everything was temporary. Only escalation was constant. Above them, the sound of conflict continued to ripple through surveillance feeds. The estate was holding, but barely. Pressure was increasing. External forces were adapting faster than expected. Lucian finally spoke without looking away from the screens. Your husband didn't send a search team. A pause. He sent a private army. As if responding to his words, one of the perimeter feeds flickered violently before stabilizing again. New movement signatures appeared on the outer city grid. Unregistered vehicles crossing into controlled territory. A subordinate voice came through the channel. Urgent but disciplined. Boss confirmation just came through. Lucian's gaze sharpened slightly. Then the words landed. His forces are inside the city boundaries. Silence followed. Not absence of sound, but the kind of silence that exists right before a system breaks. The bunker remained sealed, but Samantha Blake no longer felt like someone hiding. Something inside her had changed the moment Lucian Moretti said the words private army. Fear had not disappeared. It had evolved. It no longer controlled her breathing. It sharpened her awareness instead. A powerful internal hook formed quietly in her thoughts. Survival was not about escaping danger. It was about learning how to stand inside it without collapsing. For the first time since her escape, Samantha began observing instead of reacting. Screens around the command center displayed layered city intelligence, movement tracking, perimeter breaches, response grids. Everything was organized, structured, and constantly shifting. Lucian did not look at her while managing it, yet he was aware of her presence in a way that felt precise, not distracted. He had noticed something too. She was not breaking. Where others would have shut down under pressure, Samantha's posture had changed. Her breathing steadied. Her gaze stayed fixed on the data feeds instead of the chaos implied behind them. Trauma had not disappeared, but it had begun transforming into calculation. Lucian finally spoke, his voice low. "You're adjusting faster than most would survive." Samantha didn't answer immediately. The old version of her would have been silent out of fear. This silence came from processing. "I don't want to be protected like I'm fragile," she said at last. A subtle shift passed through the room. Not tension, recognition. Lucian turned slightly toward her for the first time since the attack updates began. "Fragility gets people killed here," he replied. "That's why I'm not fragile anymore." It wasn't bravado. It was declaration. Outside the bunker, the war above continued evolving. Surveillance updates showed coordinated resistance patterns from Richard Blake's forces. Not disorganized aggression, but structured military movement operating under command discipline. Lucian's expression hardened slightly as he absorbed new data streams. The situation was escalating, not collapsing, expanding. And for the first time, Samantha saw the reality of this world clearly. It was not built on chaos or crime alone. It was built on systems designed to counter systems. Violence here was not emotional. It was procedural. Lucian began issuing defensive recalibrations, rerouting security layers across multiple zones of the state and surrounding territory. Every command carried certainty, not hesitation. Yet even he was adjusting to something unexpected. Samantha Blake was no longer a variable of concern. She was becoming a presence, a participant, a mind adapting instead of resisting. A subtle emotional thread began forming between them, not trust in its purest form, but recognition. He saw her not as someone to protect blindly, but as someone who could stand near the structure of his world without collapsing under it. And that changed everything. Samantha stepped closer to one of the command displays, studying movement routes independently. She pointed once, not asking permission. "There's a blind corridor in that perimeter rotation." A technician glanced at Lucian. Lucian didn't correct her. He checked and confirmed. For the first time, silence between them was not tension. It was alignment beginning to form. But that alignment came with weight, because outside, Richard Blake's forces were still advancing, still adapting, still pushing deeper into controlled territory. And Lucian Moretti was no longer treating it as an intrusion. He was treating it as war preparation. His expression darkened as new encrypted intelligence arrived on his system. The room shifted subtly as he processed it. Not shock, but recalibration. Then he spoke, slowly, precisely. "The structure of this attack isn't random." A pause. His eyes met Samantha's. "And your husband isn't acting alone." The room fell into a deeper silence, because what came next wasn't just strategy anymore. It was revelation. The revelation did not bring silence. It brought alignment. Lucian Moretti stood at the center of his command structure as the final pieces of intelligence converged into a single undeniable truth. Richard Blake's network was not acting independently. It was being guided, reinforced, and strategically positioned by internal corruption already embedded within overlapping power systems. This was no longer an escape situation. It was a dismantling. And Samantha Blake stood beside him when the final confrontation began to take shape. Not behind him, not hidden, beside him. A powerful hook formed in her mind as she realized it fully. She had stopped surviving someone else's world and started existing inside one she could finally influence. The bunker had transformed into a war coordination hub. Movement updates flowed in real time. External pressure escalated across multiple zones as Blake's collapsing network attempted one final synchronized strike. But Lucian was already ahead of it. Orders moved through his system with absolute precision, cutting supply lines, isolating command cells, neutralizing betrayal nodes embedded inside previously trusted structures. What remained of Blake's empire began to fracture under its own exposed architecture. Collapse was no longer possible. It was happening. Samantha watched everything carefully, not in fear now, but in understanding. The world she once believed in, law, protection, order, no longer existed in this space. Here, survival was engineered. Power was measured in anticipation, not reaction. And Lucian Moretti was not simply reacting. He was finishing it. A communication update flashed across the central display. Multiple key operatives from Richard Blake's inner circle were abandoning their positions. Financial pipelines froze. Enforcement units disconnected. Entire sections of his influence structure went dark in rapid succession. His empire was not being defeated. It was being erased from within. Samantha felt no satisfaction from it, only clarity. This was what power looked like when stripped of illusion. Lucian finally turned toward her. For the first time, his gaze held something beyond calculation, recognition, not of usefulness, but of choice. "You didn't run," he said. Samantha met his eyes steadily. "I already did that once. It didn't save me." A quiet shift passed between them, not emotional collapse, but emotional alignment. Trust did not arrive fully formed. It emerged in fragments: decision, silence, shared understanding of consequence. Lucian extended one hand toward her, not as command, but as structure. Samantha took it. That single moment redefined everything. Outside, Richard Blake's network continued collapsing. Internal betrayal had accelerated beyond recovery. The final defensive lines failed as coordinated strikes eliminated remaining resistance points. And Samantha Blake, once a victim escaping one monster, now stood as something else entirely. Not protected, not hidden, integrated. A symbol of survival inside the architecture of power. Lucian's voice was calm as final confirmations arrived. "It's over, not victory. Completion." Samantha looked out at the screens as the last remnants of Blake's control systems went dark one by one. For the first time, she understood what survival actually meant in this world. It did not end fear. It redefined it, and she had chosen where she stood inside it. But as the system stabilized and the war appeared to close, Lucian's expression shifted slightly, just enough for Samantha to notice. Because somewhere beyond the collapsing network, deeper inside the city's unmonitored layers, a new signal had appeared, unregistered, untraceable, and still active. Lucian's gaze narrowed, not at the war that ended, but at the one that was just beginning. But deep inside the city, someone even more dangerous than her husband begins planning revenge against both of them.